I think AI definitely has its place on like the back end stuff, but how much you introduce it into that guest facing interaction, people pay for people and service.
All channels are not good for everybody. All channel managers are not good for everybody. All PMSs are not good for everybody. I mean, like everybody has a customer profile that works best for them. But if you don't understand what the customer's core needs are, like all you're doing is just like throwing words, like verbal vomit on them, like you're not helping them. So they're just not going to buy from you.
We hear people ask us about this all the time. I think if I get some properties in one location and then I get some in another state, but I'm going to keep everything centralized, that'll go across all the properties. And in theory, that works. There are very few examples of how that has worked well in our industry to this point.
Any model can be successful if they really consider the 5 key pillars of hospitality and really use those as guiding principles. The failed companies, really, they almost rejected these principles, and that's why they failed.
We'll start the show in just a minute, but first, a word from our premier brand sponsor.
I'm Mercedes, founder of MBX Homes, and we are a co-hosting company based in Southern California. We manage over 100 properties to date, and Lodgify has become the core of our business. Without it, I don't even think our business could run. It truly has become the heart. We're able to see all of the reservations. Our cleaners go into their portal and they make sure all the cleans are done for the day. And of course, our owners know exactly what's happening in their property. And I think that's amazing to have full transparency in your business on both the operational side and your client side. At MBX Homes, we pride ourselves in brand recognition, and Lodgify has truly helped with that. Since we have so many repeat clients, we're easily able to welcome our guests back by sending the direct booking link, and I think that is the feature that has really helped our business grow. By having a direct booking website, not only are we really promoting our own brand and our own properties, we are able to fully control that reservation and make the most profit for both ourselves and, of course, our clients, aka our co-hosting owners. The Lodgify team has been wonderful. They truly have supported so many hosts, including myself. During our onboarding for Lodgify, we had a dedicated person who was with us every step of the way when it came to onboarding. And ever since then, when we have new questions or we're onboarding new properties, we're able to reach out to Lodgify and they are able to help us integrate seamlessly. They're so easy to get a hold of, wherever you're getting a hold of them via Lodgify themselves, you're emailing them, or you're calling the support number. Somebody is always there to take care of you and to make sure that the problem is resolved in real time. If you're a co-host managing multiple properties, I truly do recommend Lodgify. It's a real tool that we use every single day, and it has only helped grow our business.
Looking to streamline how you manage your short-term rentals? Get started with Lodgify today and get 20% off yearly and bi-yearly plans. Plus, free personalized onboarding worth over $3,000 when you use the code AAA20 at checkout. This offer is valid until December 31st, 2025. Click the link in the description to get started today.
Welcome to Alex and Annie, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
And I'm Annie.
And we are joined today for the first time with Ashley Ching, who is the CEO and founder of Inhaven. Ashley, it's so great to have you on.
Nice to be here.
How is this the first time? I feel like we talked to you, I just feel like we should have had you on like 10 times by now. But
we've done live interviews
I
with
know,
you.
yeah,
that's true.
But somehow never on the actual show.
Yeah. But I guess in that, maybe before we really dive into what we're going to talk about, why don't you give us a little introduction about you and Inhaven?
Yeah. So again, my name is Ashley Ching, CEO and founder of Inhaven. I started my career after consulting at Tiffany and Company, and I spent almost 13 years there. I went over to Asia, managed their Asia business from a merchandising perspective, and really learned about the importance of brand standards and creating a consistent customer experience, whether they were visiting our store in Beijing to Sydney, Australia to Cincinnati. After I got back from Asia, I went in and ran their global merchandising operations and was responsible for all of the assortments and the product presentation in our stores globally. After Tiffany and Company, I left and I joined the Home Depot and led merchandising for the company store, one of their private label brands. And that's where I really got into sourcing home products, textiles, traveled around the world, going to manufacturers in India and China. And there, for the first time, I noticed that each manufacturer, first of all, everything's produced in the same places. So you go to these manufacturers and you see things from the Home Depot, Costco, Pottery Barn, Restoration Hardware, they're all produced by the same people. Um,
Really interesting.
yeah, and what was really interesting was that they had their retail line, so the things that you and I buy for our own homes, and then in a separate area of the plant, they had all their hospitality grade supplies that they would produce. So, and they
Mm.
would be sold on different channels, right? They're not sold through retail channels; they're sold directly through hospitality distributors. And I learned at that time these products that are just so much more durable. They go through way more testing than the products that you and I buy for our own homes. And so it was sort of a mental note, an interesting mental note for me. COVID had hit during the time I was there, and so we're stuck in our four walls. And so my family and I would travel, and we'd stay in vacation rentals, no longer hotels. And just the experience of staying in vacation rentals, you'd find a perfect place on Airbnb or Vrbo, but show up to, really crappy mattresses, missing pots and pans. And it was a really frustrating experience as a guest. And so I thought to myself, oh, why don't I bring those products that are hospitality grade to the vacation rental space and really create a better guest experience? And so that's really how Inhaven was born. I actually went to the executives at the Home Depot and said, "Hey, I've got this idea." They thought it was a great idea to get their products in these vacation rentals, especially the hospitality grade ones. But at the time, COVID had hit, and our sales were going crazy, gangbusters. So they just kept saying, "No, next year." And so that's, I just said, this, I don't think this is ever going to happen at a $250 billion company. I'll just go out and create it my own. And so Inhaven was born in late 2022, and we help professional property managers set standards for their vacation rentals around the comfort of the stay. So the bed, bath, and kitchen and cleaning. We focus on the areas that you can repeat across your portfolio of rentals. No one's looking for a unique sleep experience. They just want a solid sleep experience. So we focus on setting those standards with our property managers, and then we've developed a bunch of inventory management tools to, be able to maintain those standards through subscription services, through notifications that they're running low in stock, and we're connecting to various PMS platforms and Breezeway to be able to push notifications back to the teams and back to their owners in terms of invoicing.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But how fun to be able to get, like, I guess, to know that information. Like, that what you just told me and Alex, I'm like
Hmm.
thinking, like, all the things I buy, I'm like, wait a minute, it's like, am I buying
Yeah.
it from two places and it's exactly the same source? That's so
Oh,
fascinating.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, but it also goes to show how important brand is, right? And so we were just in Italy, and I was thinking about similar things. And I was looking in these different high-end stores and looking at different watches, and watches, I'm sure, are the exact same way too, right? That it's like one watch is no different than another for the most part. I mean, they're coming from the same manufacturers, but you pay for the super expensive one because you're paying for brand. And I think what you've kind of done with the linen program is kind of pushing vacation rentals, or assisting in these companies that are investing in a higher level product, to understand that it's like, that's why they're not just an Airbnb to these guests, because it is a brand. There's a reason that they stay with them, and there is a difference. And I think we as an industry have a lot more ability to control things like that than, products do, like watches, or, these sheets, like, as across an industry. But it's interesting to hear your history there.
It's fascinating. I mean, I started in Haven because I was a frustrated guest staying in these
Hmm.
homes, and I thought we just need to improve the guest experience. But what the most interesting finding I've had since founding in Haven is the people that actually want this most are the property managers. Because as you start to grow and expand, you can't have different sheet assortments in all your homes or different coffee makers, and you really need to set up a system where you've got the same products, especially when it's not related to decor, right?
Hmm.
Guests still want to feel like a local. They want to go to a place and it not feel like a cookie cutter hotel, but they don't want to compromise on their bathing, sleeping, and eating. And that's where we've really helped create standards, and it's benefited the property managers and their team probably the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So you have this incredible passion for trying to solve problems, and one of the things that we wanted to talk with you about was not necessarily solving a problem, but looking into the root of a problem. And it was why so many of these large property management groups, on not only on the hotel side but also on the vacation rental side, just keep failing. And so you did this exhaustive study, and so I think we wanted to take a little bit of time to really dive into it and understand why you did this, where you started, what you learned from it. I know I've been able to see the presentation before, and it's you did some pretty exhaustive research, and so would really like to hear about kind of the the genesis of this, and how it came to be, and what you learned from it.
Yeah, so late last year, Vacasa announced its proposed sale to the Casago Consortium. And at that point, a lot of the property managers we worked with immediately reached out and said, "What's going on here? Is our industry in trouble?" And so at Inhaven, we really started to follow this sale, and it was an incredible sale. There was, two main bidders, and so it kind of went back and forth on what was actually going to happen here. But what was fascinating about the Vacasa moment is just 3 weeks after Vacasa announced its distress sale, the largest property manager on the hotel side, so the Vacasa of the hotel side, Aimbridge, announced its out of court bankruptcy restructuring. And so these two concurrent events happening, the largest property managers on both the hotel and the vacation rental side, announcing their financial distress, led us to really look into this and understand, what's happening here. And we went and tried to understand, what's been the journey of Acasa and Aimbridge. And they have, if you look in our case study, they have very similar corporate journeys of starting with, just very moderate organic growth to a lot of acquisitions through private equity investments, and then eventually going into eventually just getting too big and owners and guests starting to churn and then going into financial distress. And we thought to ourselves, is this just two coincidences that they just happened at the same time? But as we then look back another 25 years, we saw this example of national property management trying to scale and failing over and over again, whether it was Resort Quest on the vacation rental side or Interstate on the hotel side. And so we really set out to understand, why this happened, what does lead to successful property management. So we went out and we interviewed hundreds of executives across the vacation rental, hotel, and restaurant industries in hospitality management, in property management. And we interview people on the national side of things and the local side to just understand what makes for great hospitality management and where the failures occur. And what was interesting is I think the media has said there's three main reasons why these companies have failed. One, their CEO or executive team. Two, oh, it's private equity. Or three, it's these sort of exogenous events like 9/11. It just wasn't enough. There's been 15 different executive teams that have tried for solve for national property management. So it can't just be one person or one team. And it can't be private equity if we have examples where it doesn't work in the public spaces as well. And then, so many companies have been successful even throughout these, terrible events like the financial crisis and COVID. So we really then tried to really peel back the onion of what does make for success. And so out of this case study, we were able to really uncover this five pillars of successful hospitality management was one of the items that we uncovered. One of the insights was around economies of scale. So happy to kind of go through some of them and just chat with you and get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, no, we're
if you
so
share
excited.
it. Yeah, share it. If anybody's listening, go over to our YouTube channel, and Ashley's gonna share the presentation so we can walk through it.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely want to be able to see this. So,
Yeah. So, in terms of the five key pillars of successful property management, we have five main key insights. And the first one is around curated portfolios. We heard over and over again, you have to minimize the number of bad apples. And every single property management group has their bottom 10%. It's when you get to 20% or 30% that these properties become distractions to the overall organization and almost become toxic. We heard one CEO say, you really need 4 out of 5 properties need to be drive-by and wave properties, meaning that they're
mhm.
profitable, they're just kind of doing well. You don't need to spend time with them. But it's when it becomes 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 that it really becomes distracting to the organization and it can lead to a lot of failures. So, we give examples where Vacasa and Aimbridge, they both did a lot of acquisitions through M&A. And so when you
Mhm.
acquire all these properties without doing the due diligence on every single, property, you're going to take on a lot of bad apples. And
Yeah,
so we see a lot of success through like just general organic growth, and M&A can be very costly to organizations if they're not doing the due diligence on each of the properties they're taking on.
makes perfect sense. And honestly, even with companies that maybe haven't grown through acquisition, I think that's just a talking point that comes up often now of, yeah, even if they've just taken on properties over the years to get to that point, they're starting to realize, I need to, now that I have a good business here, I need to get rid of the ones that are holding me back.
Totally. I mean, I just think of my days at Tiffany and Company. I traveled the world. I probably have gone to most luxury malls around the world. And we would go and we would scout out exactly the location that we wanted, whether it be at the entrance or a specific location next to like the Louis Vuitton store or whatnot. We would pay a premium for that location. But if we didn't get that specific location, because we'd done all of our financial analysis, knowing it would be profitable on its own, we would walk.
Yeah.
And so, it's just making sure that you're doing the due diligence on the locations that you're taking on to make sure that they're profitable on their own.
Yeah, and it
Great
goes along
point.
with, like,
Mhm.
not compromising on what your brand integrity needs to be from the
Exactly.
get-go. I have a question before you dive into this. So I meant to ask you this previous. How did you get these interviews? I mean, because I don't know how many people you know in the industry, but I mean, it's like, especially on the hotel side of it, was it something that you had a power broker that was able to get you in the doors, or did you just continually ask and ask and ask until they finally, I guess you broke them?
We have a lot of relationships, our team does, with, various players in each of these different sectors. I'm showing on the picture right now on the screen where, we note sort of the different companies we talk to across the hotel, restaurants, and vacation rental space. So obviously in the vacation rental space, that's very easy. We have a lot of great relationships with people here, but in the restaurant and hotel space, it's really through our networks that we're able to get in front of these key executives. The next key insight we heard over and over again was making sure that your property management companies, the properties that you take on, have similar demand drivers. So one of the examples here is Evolution Hospitality. They manage about 15 different hotel locations in LA and San Diego, LA and San Diego. And so they've got this urban, kind of upscale consumer that they're targeting. And they said to themselves, let's go out and let's acquire a hotel in Palm Springs. Palm Springs is only 2.5 hours away. And so they did, and they took on this hotel that they managed a property. However, in July in Palm Springs, there's massive sandstorms. And so to get get guests to book a hotel in Palm Springs in July is very different than getting, occupancy up in LA and San Diego. And so they had to go up and set an entire team up in Palm Springs to try to figure out, this very different market. And so when we talked to, other property managers, it was, making sure that you're very specific about the demand drivers that you're going after. Because once you introduce, many different markets, whether it be you're in ski and now you're going to the mountains, or you work with, primarily 1 bedroom condos and now you're taking on mansions, the expectations of the guests and getting the guests to book those properties are very different. And it forces you to, either you don't deliver on their expectations, or you just have to, really expand your team to make sure that you're developing the right marketing messages and you've got the right staff in place to manage these properties. So that was really the key insight there, is to kind of stick with similar demand drivers as you scale your organization.
We'll be back in just a minute, but first, a word from our premier brand sponsor.
Hi, my name is Julie Bird. I'm the president of Cabo Villas, and we're part of the Nocturne Luxury Villas collection. I've been with Cabo Villas for more than 23 years. When I first learned our company was going to be sold and that Nocturne was coming in, my immediate concern was for my team. Naturally, questions came up. Would they keep their jobs? Would their pay or roles change? Would their benefits be protected? As a leader, ensuring stability and security for my team was my top priority. What quickly reassured me was seeing Nocturne's commitment, not just in retaining our employees, but to actually enhancing their experience. They invested in our people, improving compensation models, strengthening benefits, and creating new opportunities for growth. Nocturne brought resources, expertise, and a culture that aligned with our values, which made me excited about what the future could hold for both our team and our homeowners. We were also concerned about whether our identity as a local expert would be honored and maintained. It quickly became clear that Nocturne respects the local expertise of our teams while providing new ways to make all aspects of our business even stronger. The results have been significant across every area: bookings, visibility, and homeowner engagement. While our digital marketing was already strong, Nocturne has elevated to an entirely new level. We're seeing steady growth in bookings, and just as importantly, we're attracting new homeowners to our portfolio. Even in a down market, we're consistently outperforming our 2024 numbers, a clear sign that the strategies and resources we now have in place are working. I would tell any company leader considering joining us that Nocturne is a partner you can trust to honor your brand while helping you take it further than you could on your own. What truly sets Nocturne apart is both the culture and the leadership. Their approach is people-centric. They genuinely care about you, your team, and the values that make your brand unique. If you want to protect what you've built while joining a team of the industry's best, with the resources and collaboration to unlock new opportunities, Nocturne is the right partner.
If you're considering your next chapter, go to nocturneluxuryvillas.com to see how they can help you protect your legacy while unlocking new opportunities.
The third key insight, which was really interesting, which I think is the least written about, at least in hospitality journals, is to really be careful and limit the number of owners that you take on, and be very picky with the owners you take on. So, an example here that's a bit of an extreme. We talked to the Pappas Group, which is a restaurant group in primarily they've got restaurants in Texas and the Midwest. Pappasitos, Papados. Don't know if you've ever dined in those locations. They are owned and managed by one family, all of the locations. And so they had gotten word that 15 of their restaurants in the Dallas area had substandard bathroom cleanliness. And so the executive team traveled immediately down to Dallas and confirmed that yes, those locations weren't living up to their standards. And so that next Monday, they decided to replace every single general manager with the assistant general managers, sending a very clear message to the team that these standards matter. And if they aren't upheld, the general managers will be replaced. And that can really only be done so swiftly because it was all owned and managed by the same group. Now on the flip side, you have Aimbridge, which at their peak were managing over 350 different owners. And so if they wanted to make changes quickly as a company, and they couldn't, right? They had to get all of those different owners on board with what they were doing. And so the message that we heard over and over again here is be careful with the owner you're bringing on, and just make sure you're limiting the numbers, because if you want to be able to drive change, having 100 owners is a lot different than having 20 or so.
Yeah. And I think companies that have owners that are more like investor type owners, where they've come on and they've got, 5 or 10 properties within that company. If you have a bunch of those, that of course it's going to simplify things, right? I mean, it's less conversations that you need to be having with people. And if you have software that answers a lot of the questions for those owners too, that's a big part of it.
hmm It's interesting because we have the number in in the hotel space. We haven't seen a successful property management company in the hotel space really be able to manage more than 300 different owners. You have Aimbridge, but they had the out of court bankruptcy restructuring, and then the number two, Highgate, took on a very large distressed portfolio a couple of years ago. And going back to point number one of a curated portfolio, we know that they are probably in a bit of trouble. So we know that the number for hotels is around 300. What is that number for the vacation rental space? We don't have that number, but just we're really trying to understand how many different owners you can manage at once. They're owners of the properties. So in the hotel space, it's very similar to the vacation rental. The owners are separate than the managers. So they then
Yeah.
hire the property manager to manage that location.
Got you. But I think
hmm
the argument could go both ways, that on homeowners and also owners in your company, because when
Yep.
when you've got a smaller decision tree there, just like the example you gave on the bathrooms, like if you've got to take it up the chain to get approval from 5 different ownership groups that are part of a company, and I work with companies that are set up that way, things can take a lot longer.
Totally. And I almost kind of want to skip the fourth pillar and go straight to the fifth pillar now, because the fifth pillar is all about empowered local hospitality professionals.
hmm
Feeling empowered to make decisions. We talk a lot about you in the hospitality industry. You hire people with a hospitality gene, people that have a smile on their face after even getting yelled at by their owners or guests. They want to make for successful experiences, and they continue to show up every day with a smile on their face. And these types of people need to feel empowered to make decisions on their own. And so when companies like Aimbridge would acquire these property management groups, and instead of doing what's best for your owner, they now are trying to do what's best for Aimbridge. And they would go to Aimbridge and say, we want to do something different for our market. And Aimbridge would say, well, that's not really the Aimbridge way.
hmm
They would feel disempowered, and those types of people need to feel empowered, so they just leave and they go to
Yeah.
other hospitality managements where they can deliver
Yeah.
on um the experiences. And so what we found was there's massive brain drain from some of these larger companies, where you're left with then the worst employees um to manage those locations. So the feeling empowered to be able to make decisions, not having to wait you know many days. Really empowering your employees is critical to the success of your overall company. And then, the last pillar was on local oriented operations, really making sure that you're delivering your operations locally versus centralizing a lot of the various parts of your organization. So, an example here is on Ambridge. They tried to centralize a lot of the finance functions and tax, and they just missed some of the local needs, like, local jurisdictions, tax needs on the tax side of things, or they tried to centralize reporting at the Ambridge way. But a lot of these hotel owners own multiple hotel properties, but not all of them are managed by Ambridge. So if they tried to roll up their financials and they had to use this new Ambridge template that didn't have all the information they need, it was very frustrating. So they couldn't get a picture of their larger portfolio of properties, and so that led to a lot of churn. On the vacation rental side, I know, we spoke to one of the executives that his company was bought out by a larger vacation rental company, and they did, pre-arrival check-ins, and it was really important to their market that they did this. This was a differentiator, and this company said, no, 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 we don't do that here at this company. So, and it led to a lot of frustration because they needed it to ensure that the guest experience was going to be great, and so that led to, a lot of just angry owners and guests and team members.
I think that's kind of like the pipe dream in our industry that we hear people ask us about this all the time of, well, I think if I get some properties in one location and then I get some in another state, but I'm going to keep everything centralized, that'll go across all the properties. And in theory, that works. And in some areas, I think it can be applied, but there are very few examples of how that has worked well in our industry to this point, to be honest. Because I think like, as you mentioned, there's just still so many nuances, especially on the marketing side. I think you can centralize some marketing, but you also have to have somebody that's local, boots on the ground, that actually understands what's going on there in the destination and about the properties. So some of these things, it's more like it's better to be like a hybrid of centralization on different assets.
Yeah. And then, kind of to the point on just scale and economies of scale, that was a really interesting finding. Sorry, I'm just going to fast forward a couple of slides here. We found that through our interviews is that in hospitality, as you scale, you experience diseconomies of scale versus economies of scale. And so let's just take an example of Ball Corporation is the example we use in the case study. And Ball is the largest manufacturer of aluminum cans in the US. And if you take labor as an example, when they set up a manufacturing line, one manufacturing line can produce up to 1 billion cans a year. And it only takes 18 people to run that
Mhm.
manufacturing line. So whether you're producing 100,000 cans or 1 billion cans, you only need 18. So the more volume you add to that manufacturing line, the unit economics improves, right? Because
Sure.
you
Mhm.
don't need to hire more people.
Yeah.
Then on the service side, where we saw diseconomies of scale, we use an example in the case study called on Forney Independent School District. And this is one of the largest or the fastest growing school districts in the country, and it's based outside of Dallas. And so we show in the presentation that this school district grew from about 8,500 students in 2013 to just under 19,000 in 2025
Wow.
this year.
Wow.
And so they've grown a lot in their student population. But as they've grown in their student population, they've actually grown their staffing at a faster rate because you have to maintain the same student to teacher ratio. And then as you
Mhm.
bring on more teachers, you need more administrators and you need to invest in different programs like special education and after school programs. And so the staff ratio actually grew at a higher rate than the student ratio. And we think about this a lot in service industries like hotels, and restaurants. As you scale, you need more administrators, inspectors, people to help manage that overall business. So we really don't see economies of scale when it comes to labor. And then we looked at, just, economies of scale with when it's comes to bulk purchasing, right? Well, in the example of ball manufacturing, 55% of their costs are just in materials. So as they go and they, improve rates on aluminum, that can have a very significant impact to their bottom line. But if you take the hotel industry, like Hilton, 55% of their costs are in labor. And so as they get bigger, people expect better wages, better benefits. You're exposed to organized labor unions. And so actually the costs increase in terms of, your biggest cost center, then decrease. And so we really just overall see diseconomies of scale versus economies of scale in the service industries.
Makes sense. Staffing's
Yeah. Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah,
You
it is
know?
for sure. And it's going
Totally.
to be interesting to see, I mean, as, life evolves and AI becomes more a part of, everything in business, like this study in a few years, I wonder how it would be impacted. What would your thoughts be on
Well,
that?
so it's funny. We talk about another example because I'm a mom of young kids. Is like preschools, right? You still need people to provide service. People expect people in the hospitality industry, and so I think AI can help on like the back end. But from a preschool perspective, you would not be okay if you're like, wait, but I've got this AI bot that's in the classroom
Right.
listening.
Yes.
If
Right,
there's
yeah.
All the
issues, right? Like
time.
you
All
need
the
that.
time. Yeah.
And I think that's very
Yeah.
similar. I think with AI, we've done some research outside of this study. One of the industries that's probably embraced technology the most is the airline industry. You've got, all the apps and the kiosks and whatnot. And what we've seen over the last 30 years with airfares is they've dropped significantly, down 35%. And the number of complaints have risen significantly. And so I think it's just, I think AI definitely has its place on like the back end stuff, but how much you introduce it into that guest facing interaction. There's some lessons learned with the airline industry. We see it in economy hotels, just people won't pay for as much when there's people pay for people and service. The other area we see it in is in hotels and the chain scale pricing. Right, economy hotels may have one person there to check you in, but when you walk into a Ritz-Carlton or a Four Seasons, I mean, there are
Yeah.
just so many people in the lobby, swarming the lobby, ready to press the elevator button for you. And so people pay, and we think that's probably the biggest differentiator between an economy hotel and a luxury hotel is the number of people in the lobby. That's what people pay for. They pay for service. And so it'll be interesting to see how AI can be incorporated in that in a way that doesn't impact, the ADRs and the guest experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's lots of different information in here. We hit on a lot of different topics, but I think these were the two main that have been the most interesting to our audience.
What was your big takeaway from all this? Like if you had to write, say for, Casago as they venture down this path of taking Vacasa, like what did you glean from this that you'd say was a recommendation that you could offer a company so they can succeed or maybe
Mhm.
pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, so there were two, and we've been asked a lot, like, okay, well, what about these different models that we're seeing out there, like, Casago's model? And I think the biggest takeaway that we have is any model can be successful if they really consider the five key pillars of hospitality and really use those as guiding principles.
Mhm.
The failed companies really they almost rejected these principles,
Gotcha.
and that's why they failed. And then the other framework we bring up in the case study that I think is really important to consider is around your operations. Are you trying to achieve? There's three main areas that companies try to achieve, whether it be service, scale, or profitability. But we heard over and over again in our interviews that really you can only get two out of three. You can't
Mhm.
develop
Yeah.
service and scale and to be
Yeah.
profitable. And so really aligning your business around two of those three principles is key. So, for example, Vacasa was really organized around service and scale, right? Their property management and they're trying to scale, but they were never profitable. We've got a company that we study in this case study called American Homes for Rent. They have about 60,000 single family homes that they rent out, they own them and manage them. They provide zero service, right? This is just, I mean,
Mhm.
they'll come in maybe if your HVAC breaks, but they've been
Right.
extremely profitable and they've scaled to 60,000 homes. So, we have examples in the case study of all three, companies that have chosen two of the three and sort of who the success stories are of those areas.
Yeah, I think another way of saying that same thing that my former mentor used to always say was, "You could have quick, cheap, or good. Pick two," right? Because
Yeah.
it's like
Exactly.
Yeah.
you can have something good,
Totally.
but it's not going to be cheap. You can have something quick, but it's going to be cheap.
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, and I think about like, we work with a lot of the local professional property managers where they really excel at service and profitability, right? But there are these local teams like abode luxury rentals in Park City or like Beverly Sorrell at Best Nest in Hilton Head, right? But that they're not focusing on scale, they're focusing more on service and profitability. So, that's where I think a lot of our in-haven customers are focused. With property management, we found, and this is sort of another key insight, is the more complex your business model is, the harder it is to scale. And so, to scale, you have to have really, you need to have aligned demand drivers, and you need to be very aligned in your product and what guest experience you're delivering. And so the more differentiations that you have in these areas, the more complex your business model has, and complexity is like the killer of scale. That's a quick summary of what we uncovered.
Yeah. And I think when you look at our industry too, I mean, those three categories, it's really important for vendors in our space to understand the difference between what the motive is of the property management company, because it's like, if you're a product that like really the main benefit is that you help companies scale, but like you just mentioned, Beverly in Hilton Head, if she's not interested in that, she's interested in the service and the profitability. What you're talking about scale means nothing to them. So, just understanding your ICP, I think, is really important. And I feel like we see that really not done well in a lot of the trade shows when you're walking around, because it's like you need to ask companies and managers, what is their goal before you start going down a rabbit hole. And maybe your product offers something that speaks to all three of those, but it's really understanding the pain points and the goal of the property management company.
100%.
Having
Yeah, I
that
think
discovery first and
Yeah,
foremost.
discovery. Yeah. Yeah. We'll be back in just a minute. But first, a word from our premier brand sponsor.
Hi, my name is Lauren Madewell. I'm with Antebellum's Cabin Rentals. We have been with Xplorie for over 15 years now. Before working with Xplorie, we were just recommending all the local attractions, but we never got anything out of it. And so now we get to work with the local attractions that we recommend, and it's not just, you should go here, it's a lot of fun. It's, you should go here, you get a free ticket, we love this place. When we first started working with Xplorie, what we were hoping that it would help us achieve is potentially signing on more homeowners because we could offer their guests more. We also wanted to earn more bookings because we were going to give guests more than the average booking. You book thinking you're just going to get a cabin or vacation rental, but now you get that and all these free tickets. So more homeowners and more guests and more repeat business. There is more competition than ever. All the markets are oversaturated. Money is tighter than ever. There's only so much you can do for a cabin. There's only so low you can go on the rates. There's only so high you can go on the specials. When we all just have rental properties, it's kind of the same thing. Where there is real value now in this economy is the guest is not just getting that cabin that they're paying for. They're seeing, with Antebellum's in particular, I'm getting over $900 in free tickets every day. That factors into their budgeting. It's an incredible economic advantage for the guests because they are looking where they can stretch their dollar the furthest. I really think that's more valuable to them than a lower rate or a higher special. I'd say the overall impact on the guest experience has been incredibly positive in measurable and immeasurable ways. Yes, we are absolutely seeing it in their Google reviews and their third-party platform reviews that they're enjoying the free ticket system. We know how much they're using it because they reach out before their stay asking questions and recommendations about the best way to use their free tickets. If another property manager asked me if Xplorie is worth it, there's no question. On the one hand, I'd be like, no, totally not worth it. Give me the competitive advantage. But no. I put my heart in everything. So I would actually say in this economy, I think you'd be silly not to work with Xplorie.
Looking to take your guest experience to the next level? Xplorie helps you stand out by connecting guests to curated, complimentary local activities. And now, Alex and Annie listeners get free onboarding when you join as a new partner. This exclusive offer is valid through November 30th, 2025. Click the link in the description to get started today.
Same from the channel side, like distribution. Like that's one of the things that I always got frustrated about is like all channels are not good for everybody. All channel managers are not good for everybody. All PMSs are not good for everybody. I mean, like there's everybody has a specific kind of niche is the wrong way to say it, but they have a customer profile that works best for them. Can they service others? Absolutely. But if you don't understand what the customer's core needs are, like all you're doing is just like throwing words, like verbal vomit on them, like you're not helping them. So they're not gonna buy from you. But so this is, I mean, like this is the second time I've seen it's like so amazing that you did this. Are you going to do like a follow-up in again, we can talk about Casago because that's the Vacasa Casago situation. Are you going to do a follow-up in like 18 months to say like, okay, where are they at and where is Aimbridge at, through their reorganization?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The chairman of Aimbridge, Steve Joyce, is actually on our advisory board at Inhaven. So
Oh,
we're,
fun.
and
Oh,
so so
really?
we're watching real time the changes, and he's coming now after,
Yeah.
and to make all these changes. So we're matching real time, and we've taken him through the study, and he talks about the five key pillars, and he's like, this is we're looking at curation, and we're looking at our number of owners, and he's like, we're using these as guiding
Oh,
principles. I
I
mean, this
love
is he
that.
didn't need us
Wow.
to. That those are the
Yeah.
things, and I've had a conversation now with Steve Schwab. We're doing an event together at Verma, and he agrees. I mean, a lot of the things that he's doing at Vicasa, through Casago, I mean, he's very much bringing the operations back to the local teams, bringing the decision making back, and how he's very pro local wins. And so it's very what they're doing are very aligned with what we found in terms of what makes for successful property management businesses. So it'll be super interesting to follow up on this in 18 months.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, we'll pencil
Yeah.
you in for that for sure. The wrap
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. No, I remember during this past spring when everything was going back and forth on Casago and Vicasa, and it was anybody's guess what was going to happen there. But I mean, you put out whenever you had a post, it was like everybody was living and dying by to see when the next one would come out because you had such great information on that. But I mean, you're obviously you're brilliant to put all this together, but
Yeah.
you spent a lot of time on it, right? I mean, like there was a
I
lot of
did.
deep
I mean, I
research.
think there was hundreds of pages of financials to read through, but I think, our customers were coming to us and asking, what is happening here? What is the state of the vacation rental industry? And so it was a moment to say, okay, here's what's going on, kind of lead them through the process, but also, give them the latest updates. And, it's just deals like this don't happen very often, right? Where there
Right.
were two
Yeah.
competing bids, massive bids. And it was fascinating. It was so fun to follow and
Yeah.
fascinating,
Yeah.
at the same time, and to be able to put out the information. And, we weren't biased. We're just literally presenting what was in these financial reports through either Davidson Kepner or through the Casago consortium. So it was a fascinating follow. And I'm really hopeful that the Casago team can really turn this business around.
Yeah. And so as your customers were coming to you and asking questions about this, I mean, where does Inhaven stand? Like what are you telling them of like takeaways based on the information?
Well, I think it's just, and that's what really drove us to do this deep dive study is, okay, so we've seen these failures sort of over and over again over the past 25 years. What does make for successful hospitality management? And so
Mhm.
that's why we put out this case study, is through all these interviews that we did. We really feel confident that the five key pillars, the operating principles that you choose, those are really great frameworks to deliver on successful hospitality management. One of the findings that we talk about briefly in this case study that we'll be spending a lot more time on is that in every single hospitality management business, whether it be restaurants, hotels, airlines, rental cars, there is a quality framework or a chain scale. Right. So, and you mentally, you don't think about, okay, am I booking an economy hotel versus luxury, but you have set your expectations on, you don't expect a Ritz-Carlton experience at a Motel 6. Or if you
Right.
go in the restaurant industry, if you go and you show up at a McDonald's, a fast food restaurant, right? If you walk away in that restaurant to go to the bathroom, you'd be very surprised if the person behind the POS came over and folded your napkin while you were
Yeah.
away, right? But
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised of that type of experience at 11 Madison Park, the fine dining. And you don't, when you fly Spirit Air, you don't expect the same sort of service that when you fly Delta. And so this chain scale does not exist in the vacation rental industry today. What, booking on Airbnb or Vrbo is a complete roll of the dice. You have no idea, you can sort of see the pictures, you can see their superhost status, but do you trust those reviews? And so it's a complete roll of the dice, and there's nothing that the consumer knows, okay, this is what I'm paying for. This is what I should expect when I show up at these properties, unless you've been able to do research on the property management business, which most people don't even know how to do that. And so what we're doing is we are going to be delivering the vacation rentals first quality framework, starting with our existing customers that have fully standardized within Haven, the Bed Bath and Kitchen, but also have these service level tiers as well. So we know Rachel and Rob at Abode have about a one staff member to every 5 property ratio. So their service is pretty high end, right? They've got very high end, I should say. They've got concierge services. If you have an issue in your home, they're probably there. They're probably there within 2 minutes, right? They've got the local team there to service you. Versus, a property management company that operates at more of like a 1 to 15, one staff to every 15 homes. And so we can pretty much chart what the service is going to look like, the service levels will look like in those homes, and then obviously the quality, because they're using the Inhaven standards. And so that is what we're delivering starting this fall, is this first quality framework for the vacation rental industry, where guests can find these homes based on the quality framework.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, since you're so into the data and doing case studies and things, have you done any case studies on your clients of people who have started using Inhaven? What's that done to the brand experience, to their bookings, to revenue? I mean, anything on that side?
Yeah, I was just talking to a large client in the mountain towns of Colorado yesterday, and she was saying, and we're going to do a case study with them. 3 years ago, they didn't have Inhaven, and the reviews have consistently gotten better because now they've got their standards in place. And so, people are consistently commenting that they loved the kitchen, the dining experience, they love the beds, the pillows, etc. And so we see it in reviews. They're able to charge more per night because of the standards and the overall look of these places. But at the same time, they're seeing significant cost savings, because when you go and you standardize and you're able to get much better bulk purchasing. So they're saving anywhere between 20 and 75% on their purchases. So, we just see it we see the better reviews. The staff are all aligned on what they need to purchase. It's very clear,
Hmm.
when something
Hmm.
breaks or gets damaged, this is what we replenish it with. And then the cost savings are just huge.
Very
Interesting.
cool. So this
Mhm.
leads up to, we're all going to be heading to VRMA, and you mentioned that you're doing a session with Steve Schwab. You're always doing a lot of things at all these conferences. So are you presenting other things that people should look out for? And
Yes.
beyond that, what's kind of on the roadmap for Inhaven going into next year?
Sure. So Vermont's exciting for us. We've got a couple of different events happening. One is the hub session with Steve, that we'll be doing on just the Vacasa turnaround and the lessons learned. We're going to go through the hospitality framework with him. The second is I'll be taking the main stage on day 2 with Tim Rizzolio from Verbo, Stephen from Marriott Homes and Villas, and Richie from Price Labs, and Jennifer Mucha from Arrive Now. We'll be talking about future proofing the industry. And so we've got a lot of great topics to talk about, including AI, in terms of pricing and just trends that they're seeing on their side. That'll be an interesting conversation. And then I'm also going to be doing a session with Valerie Gangus and Julie George from Movie Mountains on just the importance of brand standards, and how you get
Oh,
started
you
in
got a
creating them.
busy
I
schedule next
Yes,
know.
yeah,
week.
yeah, yeah. So it'll
Oh
be
my
good.
goodness.
Yes, so Burma's exciting, and then after that, we're at Burma. We're unveiling this quality framework, and a distribution site where people can now find these properties. And throughout the remaining of the year, we'll be announcing some pretty exciting partnerships with various lodging and credit card companies. So a lot to
Oh, wow.
share there,
Wow.
as we get the distribution out, because we want, these property managers that we work with that take the time and really set their standards. Now we want to help guests find these locations. And so, getting their locations in front of more eyeballs will be important. So that's sort of the next step in the Inhaven journey.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. It's been fun to watch so far and just see, I've met so many of your customers when we're at these shows, and Valerie being one of them, that they just rave about working with you guys. So
Oh, they're awesome.
yeah.
That team is so awesome. I mean, we're just lucky. We're in the hospitality industry, and everyone is just so incredible that we've met and been able to work with. It's just a joy, and our team loves all of the different property management companies that we work with.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this is going to come out on a week before VRMA. So if
Great.
anybody wants to get in touch with you or maybe set a meeting for the conference, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or your team?
Yeah, so they can reach out directly to me at ashley@inhaven.com or on LinkedIn. And happy to set up a meeting. Would love to meet anyone that wants to talk procurement or standards or just this case study at Verma.
Well,
Great.
Alex and I will be live at VRMA, so definitely love to catch up with you. Kind of maybe
Yes.
the last afternoon on Tuesday, get kind of your recap of
Yeah.
how things were, and talk about some of these exciting new announcements that you're going to be making.
Great. I would love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, Annie. Just wanted to also mention for anybody, if you're at VRMA, we're going to be in the vendor hall. I believe it's over when you walk in. I don't know the booth number, but it's over to the right-hand side. But we'll be set up with the podcast. And I know VRMA's Arrival podcast will be set up as well. And Amber Hurdle is going to be kicking that off. So be sure to stop by, get a quick interview, say hi. We'd love to see everybody. But in the meantime, if you want to get in touch with Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. And until next time, thanks, everybody.